Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Sonic Ringbond writing stream. I'm your host, creator of the AU and the author, Joshua Tarwater. You probably know me better as Sonic Fan J, as you'll see my name in the chat. Let me just mention to everybody that I am on mic. And we had an early joiner for the stream today in Tail64 of the Fox. Don't know if you're still here, but I hope you are and that you'll get a chance to enjoy a bit of my writing. Hopefully I can stay focused today, as I had the fortune, I suppose, of watching the Sonic the Hedgehog movie earlier tonight. I'll keep it out of the conversation too much. But for those curious my thoughts, I'll just say that I did enjoy it more than the first. But it should be noticed rather notoriously that I did not like the first. So we won't linger on that too long. Let's see here. If you've been here since the very beginning, you already saw the synopsis, and it probably makes barely any sense for today. Especially since this is a Sonic the Hedgehog AU, and there are no known empires besides the Eggman Empire, and the characters mentioned are entirely OCs. But as you'll notice, I got no music playing during the stream itself. That's because I listened to a bunch of stuff that I would need all sorts of rights to be able to play on stream. Not worth tracking down, so I just share my Spotify playlist and let everybody know what I'm listening to. And today that's going to be Sango no Meido, or Coral Maze, by Yukari Hashimoto from the Yamamoto Penguin Drum original soundtrack, Disc 1 in particular. Just really like the atmosphere of this one. So, for those joining for the first time and not particularly familiar with how I do things, typically in the first half of the stream, I will write the scene, and in the second half, though that's usually shorter than the first half, it's going to depend on how many tangents I go off on while I'm proofing, as I will talk about what my ideas were for the scene and what the inspiration was. Which makes me pretty glad today that I actually am not working with any official characters, just characters of my making as I do a bit of plot prepping before things really slow down with tomorrow's scene as I enter the episode of Amnesia Island story, which on a whole is meant to introduce the characters of Tempest and Rosie. For those who aren't familiar with me and my AU, Rosie is literally my AU version of Amy, based on a re-exploration of her character using her core traits and foundation, rather than the surface level traits that most people know her for, allowing her to be heavily reshaped on a regular basis. And Rosie the Rascal is her original nickname. You can find it in the Japanese Sonic CD manual, and you can also find it in Sonic the Fighters if you're looking for places to see it used outside of the Archie Comics misuse of it. Additionally, if you were here long enough to have seen the animation that was on loop with the synopsis for today's scene, that is my design for her in-universe, as the leotard I have her wearing is based around the idea of an outfit that allows her to run about, tumble, and whatnot without the problems apparent with the dress. If you need examples of similar outfits, though without the cute puffy sleeves, simply look up triathletes and triathlons, and you'll see that a basic cut swimsuit is a common outfit amongst women competitors for that. So, with that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's scene. I don't do much talking during the first half, But if you have any questions or any thoughts you'd like to share, go ahead and place them in the chat and I'll respond as I see them. And one last note as I get started. I do, over the course of the story, shape it around the idea of telling a story, a narrative that would also be fitted to a video game. No such game is in production. I should say fan game is in production because I'm no developer, but it is something that I do when I structure this just because of the way that I see things. So you'll see me making notes throughout as I write. Though there won't be too many after the start today because it's literally just one cutscene. Give me just a second. I want to double check my line. So just going to turn on that summary one more time. Okay, got what I needed out of that. Hey, and welcome to the chat 2020. Hope you're doing well. Glad you could join me tonight. It's nice to see you here. Mind that I don't talk much during these. I'm mostly focusing on writing, so. Ah, glad you think so. I don't know if I would call it professional, but I just try to have a nice look for everyone. Nice visual look helps sell the atmosphere. Alright, glad you stopped by. Have yourself a great day, 2020. I'll catch you on Twitter. Sorry about that. And there we go. That will wrap up the scene. Should be an interesting bit to talk about. May not be too long of a back half, though, because today's scene is, how shall we say, interesting. In that it's going to be delving into, how to put it, well, talking about a scenario where I have lots and lots of secrets right now. Whole lot of mysteries and plot hooks should be being planted here, so I'll be really restricted in what I talk about, and will have to pay attention to what I'm saying as I go into my tangents. For certain though as it is, this particular scene is not reading a lot like a Sonic the Hedgehog story right now. Part of the reason I had to make sure I mentioned Eggman, but we'll cover that in a bit. For now, it's going to be time for break. Usually these last about 15 to 30 minutes, so I'll leave everyone to it. And if you've been following the streams regularly, you'll notice we got a new set of characters in the slideshow. We got Thorin up first, Bowling's up next. The best that we will get for a projector. And haven't met Tempest yet. But there's Rosie. Another new character. If you follow my Twitter, you'll know who she is. And the return of Milt the Fairy. Haven't seen her since the now dropped part 2 for the story. So this will be her more so first proper introduction. But I'll leave everyone to enjoy this slideshow and enjoy it by you listen to the Sonic Rainbow main theme by Shimshon the Gadite over on Twitter. Really happy he was able to do it for me. Commissioning him was awesome, and his works are great. Recommend listening to them. So here they are, and I'll be back in a bit. And welcome back, everybody. I am your host, Joshua Turner, creator of the Sonic Ringbond AU and author of this story. For those just joining us, we are now going into the second half of today's stream where I'll sit down and white proofing. We'll be going over everything that I had going on through my head in today's scene. And welcome to the Stream Mecha from the 80s. Hope you're doing well today. Let's see here. My mind wasn't quite as focused as I'd like to be, which makes me really glad actually that I was writing entirely with OCs today. Reason for that is just yesterday, my time, uh, managed to watch the Sonic movie #2. So, it's a good thing then that I get to focus away from Sonic stuff, because otherwise I would probably talk about the movie too much right now. And I can't guarantee that all my viewers have watched it, and so we'll go ahead and keep it out of that. As normal, quick reminder of what the AU is. An AU based around the idea of using rings as a more prominent part of Sonic's world, created so I would have a world for my redesign of Amy to run around in, and of which I redesigned Amy originally out of frustration and to prove a point that I was making. These days, it allows me to explore Amy's character in a very different direction from what Sega ever has, by simultaneously I get to explore more of Sonic's world and my own take on a lot of the ideas in it. And while I try to base a lot of my stuff off of what's occurred in the games and use the Japanese manuals as a point of reference, I also try to take in a lot of what the various creators have said. But of course, I still have my own biases, preferences, and perceptions, so can't say that I'll be 100% game accurate, but I'll do my best. Today's scene, though, none of that really matters, is we're working with 3 OCs of mine, all just recently created, but you have Thorn to Crimson, Page General Pin Bowlings, and Brilliant the Projector. Kind of a weird and funny name, I'm certain. But let's see how much of this I can cover as we dive in, because I'm keeping a lot of stuff secret around them at the moment, so this may end up being a rather unusual and possibly quick proofreading. Though it's still not a particularly short scene. That said, let's go ahead and jump in. If you have any questions, now is definitely the best time to ask. And also to those just joining, or to those who sat through my break, sorry about not having the music playing. I completely forgot to turn it back on. So, first up, we're going to go ahead and start with the title. One of the big themes that I've been playing around with is the idea of forgetting everything that was. And my AU story, and really just the rebirth of the AU in general. The new characters during the break, let's go ahead and just turn them back on so I can introduce them all. Where's that slideshow? There it is. So, first up is my main OC for the AU, Tempest to Black. We'll see a lot of them. This here is Rosie the Rascal, my AU version redesigned of Amy. Nana the Hen is more of a short-term NPC who will be important early on. That was Milk the Fairy. And other new characters, we have Thorn to Crimson, Page General Pin Bowlings, and this is all that everyone's going to get for Brilliant the Projector. Suffice to say, there are various reasons for that, and we can go ahead and cover those in the story below. But for the most part, Nana the Hen there is a resident of the titular Amnesia Island that the current story will be taking place on, and she's going to have the role primarily of a character for Tempest and Rosie to bounce off of, as I start to introduce their characters in the AU. Whereas Thorn, Bowlings, and Brilliant, they are pretty much the antagonists of this arc. Though I do plan on this being a particularly slow arc. Very much of a slow burn, as it's going to be more character and situational focused than anything more action oriented. And again, part of that goes into the idea of this being the Amnesia Island part of the story. Because the idea is, as I said, to forget everything that came before, because my AU is going to use it differently. And as such, that's going to heavily affect characters like Rosie in particular, because while she will know she's Amy Rose, though she won't remember her name, as I said before, I'm stripping Amy back to her core and her foundation, which is very different from the character that she's become. If you're a fan of what the character is that she was, and you can see it here and there, even in today's stuff, it's not particularly modern anymore, but I would recommend watching the Tyson Hesse animated shorts, Sonic Mania Adventures Episode 6, and Team Sonic Racing Overdrive Episode 1, and you'll see a significantly more on-point Amy, who's a lot closer to the core and foundation of her character than what you see in a lot of other places like the IDW comics. And for the most part, I do know that what I think about, at least when I go to write her, is on point for how she should be portrayed. Because anyone familiar with my 250 tweet essay, which I would say I'm rather infamous for now, Sonic IDW comic writer Evan Stanley did take the time to actually read it, which I very much appreciate her doing so. And aside from a couple of points here and there, she says my observations on the character are spot on. So it should be, well, not spot on, but accurate. And if my observations are accurate, then it should be interesting to see how differently then I write her from official interpretations based off those same observations. Which, of course, though, is a lot of my point, is to show that Amy works even with the focus on how she's actually built as a character, rather than the surface level switcheroo that a lot of writers do to just plug her into whatever plot they want to use. But before we can get to Rosie, I need to set up the danger of the scene and a lot of the mystery of what's going on with the story. I have contemplated how much I'm going to use these guys before they start to actually actively antagonize Rosie, Tempest, and everyone else. But at the very least, I have to introduce them now, as they will start to open up expectations in the reader, until eventually those expectations fade due to the length of the episode. And so when I bring them back later, it should be kind of a nice, oh, they're back moment. How are they going to affect the story? Oh no, I know that she read my essay at least, because her and I had a conversation on it during one of her art streams. And what she was pointing out, there is no way she would have known about a number of the things that she was pointing out had she not read the essay herself. So that kind of meant a lot to me that she did. Evan Stanley is a pretty cool person. She generally keeps her distance, but she's a very cool person when you get the chance to talk to her. And she did actually offer to read my writings just to give me feedback so I could improve as a writer, so I have no problem conversing with her. So yeah, from the conversation that we had, shame she doesn't record her stream, so there's no evidence of it, but it does make it interesting to see how Amy's presented these days in light of accurate observations on her character. So, and now we're going to jump right in. My typical writing structure, as I say every stream, is to introduce a paragraph at the beginning, or to have an introduction paragraph at the beginning to kind of give an idea of what to expect from the scene. And then I wrap it up again at the end, and if I can, I will feed a little bit into what the next scene is going to be. In this particular case, I get to talk about government and expectations around it. And a lot of the problems with governments as a whole, don't want to get too political on it, is a government exists so a group of people can survive in the most efficient and comfortable way possible. The better the government is at managing that, the more productive, happy, and thriving the system under the government will be, and the nation will grow in turn. So, I open up with the idea of this little starting line here: the empire lives, may it be forever. And part of the idea behind this, and it's something I don't think a lot of people necessarily understand, is it's meant to carry an air of dictatorship. Because an empire, and a lot of people will perceive it that way, especially because of the British Empire, is that an empire is ruled by a singular person and usually with an iron fist. And everybody under the empire suffers. Yet they appease the emperor so as not to be hurt. To just live their lives as peacefully and quietly as they can. And so this saying, which is meant to be something that the people of the empire say and are heard to say routinely, is to show loyalty through words, even if there's a lack of loyalty through action or thoughts. But you say a phrase enough and you start to believe it. And that's where we get into this next part, where I talk about the ideas of what a government should be doing. As well as the primary problems that a government has, before talking about loyalty to a government versus loyalty to people. It's just kind of a simple little thing to kind of get one thinking of, as we go into this and these characters start talking, how much can they be trusted? And that's really the idea that I want to create here, is a sense of unease, a lack of trust of what's going on. And that is because ultimately these characters are antagonists. They are going to stir the pot when I finally get around to introducing the remaining main characters, because obviously Sonic's a main character, but then Tempest and Rosie are also both going to be main characters. The story is going to perpetually follow these three characters, their interactions with each other, and the world around them, as well as various antagonists. And so as we roll into the main body, I'll go ahead and actually talk about the name of the zone that I got going on here. Catalyst System. Pretty straightforward name. The whole idea behind this particular chapter and the story is literally to point out things are happening, things are in motion, and soon enough, that's going to affect everything. And so we'll go into my typical quick sentences to help paint that picture into the reader's mind without anything else around it. Because generally when you read this, you're just going to form your own picture in your head. I do get a little off base though as I take the time to describe Bowlings and Thorn in these opening lines. Normally I keep that to artificial characters, so you would see Metal Sonic in this, or when I introduced my Machine Knights into the story again, who are characters I haven't talked about really since going into the 2022 story. But the big thing to take away from all of this is the idea that introducing them here, where I normally keep things artificial and removed from characters, or I keep it environmental and removed from characters, I put in here two heroes. And so part of the idea behind that is again to sell the idea that these people are perceivable as heroes from the Empire. What aspects of the Empire can vary, but because of the nature of the story, can they be considered heroes? Hence the parentheses to really show the idea that things should not be taken at face value. That there's more going on with this scene than it looks like. And as we move on from that, literally this first paragraph is really to introduce Bowlings in a paragraph. And you get him rubbing his mustache, so you get a sense of discomfort. He's complaining about a lack of available comfort. And then you also see he's not comfortable with the idea of not knowing what someone's thinking. The idea of a helmet which hides all that. You see him not liking anything which makes him uncomfortable. And thus, what you start to establish in almost an immediate sense is that this character should carry an air of slothfulness around him and distrust. And at the very least, I hope that comes across. And while it may not come across to the audience, it is immediately confirmed by Thorn that she is not threatening his pursuit of comfort. From there, I move to introduce who they are. And what you'll notice, in his case, he's someone who's uncomfortable. In her case, she doesn't even care about him. And then you get the next paragraph from him, just again, coming in and giving an idea of who they are. And you see him leaning the rail into this floating platform, while also trying to pry information out of her. And so there's a lot of little things which are going on here, which are just to lean into that slothfulness around his character. And then as the conversation continues, it again is just a idea to carry together that atmosphere that they're carrying. Hence where we get to the point that she responds with silence when asked if she's not one for small talk. And this should sell the idea that Thorn is a very serious and focused character. There's more to her than that, but it's something which requires a bit more effort to bring into things. And that will come later on in the story, especially as she gets to interact with Rosie and Tempest. For now, she's duty focused. And so as we shift away from her focus on duty, get to play again with the idea of pushing his discomfort and his refusal to accept a lack of comfort. And so, though there should be an air of slothfulness around him, there should also be an air of entitlement around him that he has the right to his slothfulness, even if he's got to work for it. And though, let's talk about his bracelets a little bit as well, which are mentioned here. Is even though they, for the most part, tie into a very similar visual imagery as silver, I mean, literally, they are design-wise pretty much the exact same types of bracelets, I refer to them as shackles. And the reason they're shackles is the use that I use of them, which will be covered a bit deeper in the scene, and it is covered right here actually in the same paragraph, is they keep his powers under control. He's a pyrokinetic. Though if you'll notice in the Empire, they refer to people with such abilities as netics. And so the idea of these binding something is part of why I call them shackles. And so, again, these opening paragraphs, and the whole point of this scene is to introduce these three characters and what they're up to. And so, again, he gets to continue to push into trying to identify anything he can about Thorn. And you'll see his first guess is that she's probably a hedgehog. I don't have that image available to drop into the stream, or not too easily. Give me a second here and I'll just drop that right in so everybody can take a quick look at it. It'll only take a moment for me to track it down. There we go. If you see Thorn's armor here, we'll just make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. There we go. You'll notice her armor here does indeed have the back spikes of hedgehogs. Hence what he's talking about. One moment. Alright then, sorry about that interruption. But yes, so you do see where he's basing his judgment off as these back spikes, the long split spikes of her helmet. She's an oddity to behold, so to say. I'll just knock her out of the scene real quick so I can get back. And so give her a chance to speak for herself a little bit, and where she refers to herself as a loyal subject of the Empire. And from there, the next paragraph is I gotta introduce a bit of the structure of the Empire, where you'll see me talk about all sorts of interesting things, such as the Projector, the Emperor, the Council, the Secretaries. And these are all various forms of the government. And as I cut him off, I get to introduce the last character, and I specifically take the time to describe how he's heard, as though his voice came out of thin air. And this again is tying into the ideas and abilities of a projector. There's quite a lot they can do, and it should serve to make them very interesting entities in the story. But we'll see more of what he can do later on, and a little bit of it within this episode. But that will be closer to the end as we're wrapping up various things. And I'll kind of explain what the ideas and plans are for this episode as we get to it. But I will cover a little bit towards the end of this stream. Meanwhile, you'll see that I introduce him as Brilliant. That's his name, is Brilliant. Brilliant the Projector. There's a bit of a joke in that. And in general, there's kind of a fun joke involving Thorn, Bowlings, and Brilliant, in that I use blue to represent Brilliant, Bowlings has green eyes, and Thorn is known as the Crimson. And so as a result, you get RGB. And so there is a bit of fun there with the three of them. And there are reasons for that too. My theming does have a reason, it's not just madness without. And now I do get to describe a specifically detailed location, because I'm describing more so an object, less so than setting the scene. And I'm kind of helping to sell how unnatural this location is. And you'll notice I present Brilliant with a more polite demeanor versus Bowling's rough demeanor and Thorn's very stiff demeanor, which is itself kind of fun, because her being named Thorn and having a stiff demeanor, that fits very well together, and that one is unintentional. And again, you'll see this idea of distrust from the general towards the projector now as well. And again, you see Thorn has this air of it doesn't matter. She keeps that cold distance before shifting to what's going on and what they're there for. And so I'll just take a moment again to describe what they're interacting with. So not too much going on here, aside from maybe the efficiency and speed with which Projector works, which is something to keep an eye on as well and to think about for later. now I introduce the plot for these guys as we get past that. And you'll see a bit of a motion of where the structure of the government of the empire is as well. The emperor sits on top, the council beneath him and carries out his decrees, and then the secretaries beneath them. And all with obviously their own ambitions and aims. And now I introduce the idea that Brilliant has been around for a while by calling him ancient. And for even Bowlings to call him ancient is to say something. Especially as they've already called him older, and a little later down the list, he describes himself as being at his retirement. If anybody's familiar with U.S. military, you retire after 20 years of service. And since that's the only military I'm familiar with, it should give you an idea that Bowlings has been active for a long time. And so for him to call Brilliant ancient carries significant weight. And now I get to start playing into some of the rumors and to take advantage of Bowlings' distrust to continue to paint a picture of this empire that I'm keeping mostly in secret for now. When I do the big reveal on it later on, it should be pretty shocking, I hope. As the idea that I'll be introducing to define the empire and what it is, I really hope it will be a nice wow moment. Or at least oh type of moment. I'll see. It's a long time before I start to reveal the truth of the Empire. There will more so just be a thorn in the side of Rosie and Tempest's adventures. Sonic, not so much, but we'll cover Why Not Sonic soon enough. Well, you know, I'll get a little further to, as I said, cover that, but there is something which is covered here as well. And now you do get an interesting bit from Thorn here and her degree of loyalty. You see Bowlings constantly questioning everyone, not trusting everyone. He is in a position of authority and power to where he knows how much people are willing to backstab each other, and so he trusts no one. Whereas Thorn constantly presents distrust in the Empire and the Imperial military and government. And so it's kind of a nice contrast between the two. And considering the plans I have for the two characters, especially Thorn, it should be quite interesting later on in the story when I get around to shifting things, so to say. So that way the story's focus around her gets rather interesting, and she has a nice fun character arc to get to wherever she'll end up. We'll see. I generally am a make it up as I write it storyteller, so even though I have ideas for her, where she ends up is still in the air. Bowlings, I have less ideas for, and as such, he's free to end up almost anywhere. So we'll see what happens. So then it just continues with the idea of whether or not the government should be trusted or not. And you'll see that Brilliant has already taken into account both perspectives on it, which should again be selling the idea of just how smart Brilliant is. There are a lot of puns with his name, so to say, but the puns will become more obvious in time as he gets used more and more throughout the story. Let me just change the order of this sentence so it makes a bit more sense. And so again, you get to see this little play as we go on, showing again Bowling's suspicion while helping illuminate the political side of Brilliant's scheme. As political machinations will affect characters like this, it's not normally something I delve into. That's usually boring to me, and I hope at the least I've avoided writing it boring by using the characters themselves to talk about. And so again, you see the idea of this also being Bowling's last mission. And then as I move past that, I take a moment to throw just a little bit more background for Thorn into the mix to kind of help paint a picture of the relationship between these three. And I also get to take the time to show her own sarcasm and to also show again that Thorn is very mission focused. And she's also very observant of what's going on. Now, one of the things that I'm going to hope for at this point of the story is that the idea of the Skyring, or as it's called all the way back in the first chapter, the Ring of Memories, hopefully at this point, the idea that's mentioned in that first chapter of a thief gets to come back in full here, and the idea of a person, something appearing in the Ring of Memories, and the idea of interacting with it. This now tells you that I'm actually bringing Yodoku's game back into the story with the idea of the hunt for the thief. I plan on having a bit of fun with that and how I attempt to manage my audience's expectations around it. We'll see if my writing skills up to snuff. As long as it's enjoyable, though, hopefully that will be enough. Now, of course, as I said, I do have a lot of things going on. And now I get to present why it's going to take a while before I use them again. And it may be kind of tricky to understand right now, at least until the next scene, why they will end up where they end up. And now you also get to see that Bowlings does have pride, as he sees the situation as beneath him, with based off what the Sai is meant to tell. And so he sees it as a very demeaning situation. And then I get to introduce one of my big fun little plot ideas, is the idea of machine gods. If you've been with my prior work, you'll have an idea of what they are and what they can do. And so the idea that they'll be... Sorry about that. But the idea that they'll be in the story at this point already should again be painting ideas to pay attention to. I am literally layering threats upon threats and trying to seed into your minds all these possible factions, threats, and problems which are going to be coming down the road for Rosie and Tempest once we get to them. Again, the whole point to this particular scene is to introduce the idea of new antagonist other than Eggman. However, that's not to say that Eggman is not to be considered, as he does get mentioned here that they are to avoid Eggman at all costs. And there are all sorts of different reasons for that. But right now, the idea is that, again, even though how things just went for Eggman when you last see him, prior scene, weren't necessarily going well, I am able to sell again at the very next scene that yes, Eggman is a threat. And one that should be taken seriously. Which I will take half a moment to talk about the Sonic movies and say that that is one thing I do appreciate them for. They do not hold back on making Eggman out to be a threat. And that is pretty awesome in my opinion. And now I get to a little bit of finishing up Thorn's physical description of the story. Is her smile. And originally I had ideas behind what the smile represents, but it works out really well here that it doesn't really represent anything. Not that's mentioned, at least. And so you get to see Bowlings now get unsettled. And this starts to sell the idea of what this smile does to people when they see it. Well, it gives them chills. It makes them ill at ease. To the point that I even play it more by showing she doesn't check her own balance as the platform collides with its dock. She just maintains the same mannerisms and the same steadiness, even though she's now wearing that smile. And so then the idea of calling her a monster plays into it. Just I'm building an image for her, so to say. And that's the whole point around it, is just to create ideas to go, oh, get you to go, oh, she's definitely going to be a problem when she intervenes. Look how calm and collected she is. She's smiling at the mention of Eggman. Generating general ideas of looking at things from a bigger picture, even while soaking just into the scene at hand. And I finished the scene by wrapping up again on Bowlings and his laziness, but also showing how weak he really is with his pyrokinesis due to the exhaustion he has from maintaining that flame he had going. And the fact that his shackles were still open, and you see a lot of how he was talking as he had his shackles open. He wasn't showing fear, he was showing he was free, but now as he... what's the word I'm looking for? Resigns himself to this mission, the shackles close. And so it's a nice little bit of symbolism, even as you see him with his words following up that imagery by even saying, should have put the flames out sooner. He's even sitting there saying to himself, should just be loyal and work hard. This is a good little seed to keep in mind later for plans that I do have for his character, much looser as they are compared to Thorn's. And then as we wrap that up, I go back to the idea of ambition within governments and the problems that they can cause, as well as what keeps government safe. Not what keeps people safe, what keeps government safe. And caution and worry enough unquestionably keeps government safe. Because even corrupt people will keep a government established just to maintain control of the power they have. And that's kind of the way that I look at politics, the idea of manipulating others to amass power. And so again, I play out the idea of the two heroes tasked with saving the Empire have more than enough caution and wariness for the entire Empire. And then, of course, I wind it up with at what cost? And the idea behind that question is actually to lead into the next scene, showing a everyday life scenario, so to say. It won't quite start everyday life, but it is the lead-in now to show the life that Rosie's been living since the fall of the Death Egg. Will be the time period that we'll call it. And with that, I reach the end of the scene and all of its wonderful problems, which I'll have to pick up when I'm prepping to publish, but we'll let Microsoft Word's editor lend a hand and at least fish out a little bit of the things I've missed. While I'm working on that, now's a perfect time to ask me more questions if anyone has any. I'll be more than glad to give them an answer. Well, don't worry about getting mad at me for that one. That's just one I prefer it my own way. Sometimes I find my style better fitting than what Microsoft Word's editor does. But with that, this scene is over. And I get to thank everyone again for joining me. And I will be back tomorrow, as I typically am. I am looking forward to seeing everybody then. And until then, thank you very much for joining me. I truly appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed today's scene, story, and a bit of my babble. Not too much tangents today, because working with OCs, not too much I can talk about the Sonic characters themselves. But that will be changing tomorrow, as Rosie will be introduced into the story finally. So I hope everyone looks forward to seeing her. I look forward to seeing everyone then. But for now, have a great day and stay well.